The sodium orange glow of the parking lot lights cast long shadows across Jack Turner's weathered face as he gazed at his daughter through the rearview mirror. Lily lay curled up in the back seat, her small frame wrapped around the teddy bear she'd had since birth. Its once golden fur had faded to a patchy brown, much like their hopes had seemed to fade these past few months. "We'll be okay, sweetheart," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible above the autumn wind whistling past the car windows. "I promise you that." The words felt hollow in his throat. He blinked hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. Lily didn't need to see him cry. She needed him to be strong, to be the father she deserved. The car's digital clock blinked 9:47 p.m. Jack slipped out of the driver's seat, careful not to wake Lily. The cold air hit him like a slap, and he welcomed it. Anything to keep him alert, to keep his mind from wandering down the dark paths it seemed determined to explore lately. He paced beside the car, his breath forming small clouds in the chilly night air. The Walmart parking lot stretched out before him, mostly empty except for a few cars belonging to night shift workers. They'd chosen this spot carefully, far enough from the store entrance to avoid attention, but close enough to the streetlights to feel safe. "Sarah," he whispered his late wife's name into the darkness. "I don't know if I'm doing this right anymore." The memory of her smile, bright and unwavering even in her final days, squeezed his heart. "I promised you I'd give her a good life. But look at us now." 3 months ago, he'd been a respected construction foreman with a steady paycheck and a comfortable apartment. Then the company downsized, and despite his experience, Jack found himself among the first to go. The severance package hadn't lasted long. The apartment went next, and then a sound from the car drew his attention. Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about her art class. Jack's throat tightened. She hadn't been able to go to school for weeks now, and it killed him to see her missing out on the things she loved. He opened the trunk quietly, pulling out their small camping stove and a can of soup. It wasn't much, but it would be warm, and warm food helped them both sleep better. The ritual of preparing their simple meal gave him purpose, if only for a few minutes. Back in the driver's seat, Jack carefully balanced the heated soup can between them. "Lily, honey, I've got some dinner for us." She rubbed her eyes, sitting up slowly. Her dark hair was mussed from sleep, reminding him so much of Sarah it made his chest ache. "Is it the tomato kind, Daddy?" "Your favorite," he managed to smile, handing her a plastic spoon. "Careful, it's hot." They ate in comfortable silence, the soup warming their insides against the advancing chill of the night. Lily hummed quietly between spoonfuls, a habit she'd picked up from Sarah. Jack remembered countless evenings of his wife humming while cooking dinner, Lily perched on a kitchen stool, mimicking every note. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small but clear. "Can you sing the song Mommy used to sing?" "The one about the stars?" Jack's heart clenched, but he nodded. "Sure can, Princess." He cleared his throat and began to hum the lullaby Sarah had sung every night since Lily was born. His voice wasn't nearly as sweet as Sarah's had been, but Lily didn't seem to mind. "Twinkle above, shine your light, guide us gently through the night, watch us sleep and watch us dream, until morning's first sunbeam." By the second verse, Lily's eyes were already heavy. She curled back up with her teddy bear, this time reaching out to hold Jack's hand where it rested on the center console. Her small fingers were warm from the soup. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured, drifting off. "Love you too, baby girl." Jack squeezed her hand gently, watching as her breathing evened out into sleep. The guilt crashed over him then, a familiar wave that threatened to drown him. What kind of father lets his daughter sleep in a car? The shame burned in his throat, mixing with exhaustion until he could barely think straight. He should have seen the layoffs coming, should have saved more, should have found another job faster, should have... The list of failures seemed endless. Each one weighed on his shoulders until he felt crushed beneath them. His eyes grew heavy, and he reclined his seat slightly, trying to find a position that wouldn't leave his neck aching come morning. The parking lot had grown quieter, with only occasional cars passing on the nearby street. Jack's thoughts began to blur, exhaustion finally winning out over his anxiety. His breathing slowed, matching Lily's peaceful rhythm. Just as he was about to drift into what promised to be a restless sleep, a soft tapping sound jolted him back to consciousness. There was someone at his window. Jack's heart leaped into his throat, his body tensing as he instinctively reached back toward Lily. His tired mind raced with possibilities. Security guard, police, or worse. The gentle knock came again, more tentative this time. The knock made Jack's heart race. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror, checking on Lily, who still slept peacefully in her nest of worn blankets. With trembling fingers, he pressed the window button, letting it down just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper to avoid waking Lily. Standing in the glow of the parking lot lights was an elderly woman. She wore a thick wool coat and a purple knitted scarf wrapped snugly around her neck. Shopping bags hung from one arm while her other hand clutched her coat closer against the autumn chill. "I'm Margaret," she said softly, matching his quiet tone. Her eyes crinkled with kindness. "I noticed you've been here a while and I couldn't just walk away without checking if you're all right." Jack's shoulders tensed. He'd chosen this spot carefully, parking far from the store entrance where fewer people would notice them. "We're fine, ma'am." "Thank you for your concern." He started to raise the window, but Margaret gently raised her hand. "Please," she said, "I saw you heating soup earlier. There's a diner just across the street that serves hot meals all night." She gestured toward a lit-up building with warm yellow windows. "Let me buy you and your little one something proper to eat." "That's very kind, but we don't need charity." Jack's voice came out harder than he intended, pride making his words sharp. Margaret didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled sadly, her eyes drifting to where Lily slept. "It's not charity, dear. It's just one person helping another. Sometimes life gets hard, and we all need a friendly hand." Jack followed her gaze to Lily. His daughter's face was peaceful in sleep, her small fingers curled around her teddy bear's worn ear. The bear's stuffing was coming loose at one seam, another thing he couldn't afford to fix. His throat tightened. He started, but the words stuck. "The special tonight is meatloaf," Margaret continued gently, "with real mashed potatoes and gravy." When was the last time she had a proper hot meal? The question hit him like a physical blow. Jack closed his eyes, remembering the endless string of canned soups and cold sandwiches. His daughter deserved better. He deserved better too, but his pride warred with his common sense. "I don't want to wake her," he said finally, his resistance crumbling. "She can sleep until the food comes," Margaret assured him. "I'll wait while you carry her over." Jack nodded slowly, then turned off the car's engine. He stepped out into the cold night air and opened the back door. With practiced care, he gathered Lily into his arms, blanket and all. She stirred slightly, nuzzling against his chest without waking. Margaret led the way across the parking lot, her shopping bags rustling softly. The diner's bell tinkled as they entered, and warm air wrapped around them like a blessing. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, didn't bat an eye at their unusual group. She simply led them to a corner booth where Jack could lay Lily down on the cushioned seat. "Coffee?" the waitress asked quietly. Jack hadn't had real coffee in weeks. "Yes, please," he whispered. Margaret settled into the seat across from them, unwinding her scarf. In the diner's warm light, Jack could see the silver threading through her hair and the laugh lines around her eyes. She reminded him of his mother, who'd passed away years ago. "Order whatever you'd like," she said, pushing a menu toward him, "and maybe a little something for when she wakes up." Lily stirred then, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around in confusion, then up at Jack. "Daddy?" "Hey, sweetheart," he murmured, smoothing her tangled hair. "This nice lady invited us for a late dinner. Are you hungry?" Lily sat up slowly, clutching her teddy bear as she looked at Margaret. She was usually shy with strangers, but something about Margaret's gentle smile seemed to put her at ease. "I'm Margaret," the older woman said softly. "I hear they make wonderful chocolate milk here. Would you like some?" Lily's eyes widened and she looked up at Jack questioningly. When he nodded, a small smile spread across her face. "Yes, please," she whispered. The waitress returned with Jack's coffee and took their orders. Margaret insisted they order full meals: meatloaf for Jack, chicken fingers for Lily, and a garden salad for herself. As they waited, she chatted quietly with Lily about her teddy bear, drawing the child out of her shell with gentle questions and warm smiles. Jack wrapped his hands around the coffee mug, soaking in its warmth. He watched as Lily slowly began to relax, even giggling at Margaret's silly story about her cat who liked to sleep in flower pots. It had been so long since he'd heard that sound. When the food arrived, steam rising from the plates, Lily's eyes grew round. "Look, Daddy. Real potatoes." "Yes, sweetheart," he managed, his throat tight. "Eat up while it's hot." They ate in comfortable silence, broken only by Lily's occasional happy humming. Jack couldn't remember the last time he'd had a meal this good. Every bite of the meatloaf reminded him of better days, of family dinners and security he'd thought would last forever. As they finished their meals, Margaret stirred her tea thoughtfully. "I have a proposition for you," she said quietly. "I live alone in a house that's too big for just me. There's a guest house in the back, nothing fancy, but it's warm and clean. It's just sitting empty and—" She paused, meeting Jack's eyes. "You don't have to spend another night in that car." Jack's fork clattered against his plate. The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and meaning. His chest felt tight, caught between desperate hope and crushing shame. Margaret reached across the table and placed her warm hand over his. "It's not charity," she said again, as if reading his thoughts. "It's just being human." Jack looked down at their hands, his rough and work-worn, hers soft and weathered with age. He thought of Lily sleeping in the back seat, of the cold nights ahead, of all his failures as a father. His pride screamed at him to refuse, but Lily's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Is there a yard?" she asked Margaret shyly. "For drawing pictures outside?" Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he followed Margaret's silver sedan through the quiet streets. Street lamps cast warm circles of light on the wet pavement, and Lily pressed her face against the back window, watching the neighborhoods grow nicer with each passing block. "Look, Daddy," she whispered, pointing at houses decorated with twinkling autumn lights. "They're like fairy houses." His throat tightened. "Sure are, sweetheart." Margaret's brake lights glowed red as she turned into a tree-lined driveway. Jack pulled in behind her, taking in the modest but well-kept two-story house with its neat flower beds and wind chimes dancing on the front porch. Behind it stood a smaller structure, the guest house she'd mentioned. "Here we are," Margaret called softly, stepping out of her car. She gestured for them to follow her along a stone path that wound through her backyard. "Watch your step. These stones can be slippery when wet." The guest house was smaller than their old apartment, but far cozier than their car. Margaret unlocked the door, and a gentle scent of lavender wafted out. She flipped on the lights, revealing a small living space with a kitchenette, a bathroom door, and stairs leading to what must be a bedroom. "It's not much," Margaret said, "but it's warm and dry." Lily's eyes went wide as she took in their surroundings. "It's like a dollhouse." She spun around, her teddy bear clutched to her chest. Jack stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in their fortunes. The space was clean and furnished simply. A comfortable-looking couch, a small dining table with chairs, basic kitchen supplies, everything they'd been missing for weeks. "I keep it ready for visitors," Margaret explained, running her hand along the back of a chair, "though I haven't had any in quite some time." Something in her voice made Jack look at her, a flash of loneliness, quickly hidden behind a warm smile. "This is—" Jack cleared his throat. "This is too much, Margaret." "We can't. You can, and you will," she said firmly. "At least for tonight. There are clean sheets on the bed upstairs, and the bathroom has fresh towels." She paused, then added gently, "Everyone needs help sometimes, Jack." While Margaret showed Lily where everything was, Jack brought in their few belongings from the car: 2 duffel bags of clothes, Lily's backpack with her school supplies, and a box of important papers. It didn't take long to settle in. Their meager possessions looked almost lost in the space. Lily immediately claimed a spot on the couch, pulling out her worn sketchbook and crayons. It was her comfort activity, drawing whatever came to mind. Jack watched her for a moment, grateful that she could still find joy in simple things. Margaret was about to leave them for the night when she noticed the sketchbook. "Oh, are those your drawings, dear?" Lily nodded shyly, and Margaret sat beside her. "May I see them?" As Margaret carefully turned the pages, her expression softened at Lily's colorful interpretations of the world. Butterflies, rainbows, their old apartment, their car with stars above it. But suddenly, her hands trembled, and she let out a small gasp. "This one," Margaret's finger traced a figure on the page. "This soldier." Jack moved closer to look. It was one of Lily's favorite stories to draw, the kind stranger who'd helped him years ago. In the drawing, a tall soldier stood straight and proud, wearing a distinctive heart-shaped locket around his neck. "Where did you see this?" Margaret's voice quivered. "I told Lily that story dozens of times," Jack said quietly. "About 10 years ago, I was having a rough time. Sleeping in bus stations, trying to find work. This soldier saw me one day, bought me lunch, talked to me for hours. Before he shipped out, he gave me his locket for good luck." Jack's voice grew thick with emotion. Said his mom gave it to him, but he thought I needed the luck more than he did. I lost it a few years later, but I never forgot his kindness. It helped me believe in myself again. Margaret's hands shook as she reached beneath her collar and pulled out a chain. Dangling from it was a heart-shaped locket identical to the one in Lily's drawing. "My son," she whispered. "David. He was always helping people. Said it was his mission even before he joined the service." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He never came home." Jack stared at the locket, then at Margaret, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Your son, he was the one who helped me?" Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Lily, sensing the emotion in the room, crawled into Margaret's lap and wrapped her small arms around her neck. Margaret held her close, and Jack sat beside them, placing a gentle hand on Margaret's shoulder. They sat like that for a long while, connected by an act of kindness from years ago. When Margaret finally spoke again, her voice was stronger. "David would be so happy to know you're here. That his kindness led you back to me, in a way." Later that night, after Margaret had gone to her house and Lily was asleep upstairs, Jack stood at the guest house window. The events of the day felt surreal. The knock on his car window, the warm meal, this safe place to sleep, and the incredible connection to Margaret's son. For the first time in weeks, he felt a fragile spark of hope. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through the windows. Jack stepped outside to stretch his legs, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Movement caught his eye, and he turned to see a well-dressed man standing at the fence that separated Margaret's property from the neighboring house. The man watched him with undisguised suspicion, his expression cold and calculating. Jack straightened his shoulders, fighting the urge to shrink from the neighbor's scrutiny. He'd faced worse than disapproving looks before. But something about the man's stare made him uneasy, as if the peace they'd found here might be more temporary than he'd hoped. The morning sun streamed through the guest house windows as Jack pulled on his work boots. He'd been up since dawn, determined to earn his keep. His muscles ached from yesterday's yard work, but the sight of Lily eating breakfast at a real table made it all worthwhile. "Ready for your first day, sweetheart?" Jack asked, watching Lily adjust her backpack straps. Margaret had helped them get her enrolled at the local elementary school, even providing some new supplies. Lily nodded, though her fingers nervously twisted the hem of her shirt. "What if nobody likes me?" Jack knelt beside her chair. "They're going to love you, just like I do." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Remember what we always say? Turners never give up," Lily whispered, managing a small smile. A gentle knock at the door announced Margaret's arrival. She carried a brown paper bag. "I made you lunch, dear," she said, handing it to Lily. "Turkey sandwich, apple slices, and I snuck in a chocolate chip cookie." Lily's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Miss Margaret." The walk to school was short, just 4 blocks through the neat suburban streets. Jack couldn't help noticing how different this neighborhood was from their old one. Perfect lawns, expensive cars, and watchful eyes behind pristine windows. Mrs. Hawkins stood watering her prized roses, her lips pressed into a thin line as they passed. At the school gates, Lily's grip on Jack's hand tightened. Children streamed past them, calling out to friends and racing to the playground. Jack squeezed her hand. "You've got this, kiddo." "Have a wonderful day," Margaret added warmly. She'd insisted on coming along for moral support. Lily took a deep breath and walked through the gates. Jack watched until she disappeared inside, his heart aching with pride and worry. Back at Margaret's house, Jack threw himself into work. He cleaned gutters, fixed loose shingles, and tackled the overgrown flower beds. His hands remembered the rhythms of physical labor, finding comfort in the simple satisfaction of tasks completed. Around mid-morning, he overheard voices drifting over from Mrs. Hawkins's yard. "It's shameful, really," Mrs. Hawkins was saying to another neighbor. "Margaret's always been too trusting. A strange man and his child living right in her backyard. Who knows what sort of person he is?" Jack's jaw clenched, but he kept working, dirt grinding under his fingernails. "I heard they were living in their car," the other woman whispered. "In the Walmart parking lot of all places." "Exactly my point. What kind of father subjects his child to that? And now he's wormed his way into poor Margaret's home. Mark my words, he's taking advantage." Margaret's screen door slammed. "Good morning, ladies," she called out, her voice carrying clearly. "I couldn't help overhearing." "Since you're so concerned about my welfare, you should know that Jack Turner is doing more work around here than I've seen from any handyman in years. Perhaps you'd like to come see the repairs he's made?" The neighboring women fell silent. Jack ducked his head, continuing to weed the flower beds, grateful for Margaret's defense but burning with shame. The afternoon brought worse news. Jack's phone rang during his lunch break. It was the school. Lily was upset and asking for him. He found her in the nurse's office, tears streaking her cheeks. "What happened, baby?" he asked, gathering her into his arms. "Some big kids at recess," she hiccuped. "They said we're homeless. That we live in a car like garbage." Fresh tears spilled over. "I told them we have a house now, but they laughed." Jack's heart cracked. He held her tighter, wishing he could shield her from the cruelty of children who didn't understand. "You listen to me, Lily Turner. We are not garbage. We hit some hard times, but we never stop trying. That makes us stronger than they know." The nurse watched sympathetically as Jack signed Lily out for the day. Back at the guest house, Margaret made hot chocolate and listened as Lily described what happened. Her kind eyes met Jack's over Lily's head, sharing his pain. "You know," Margaret said, "when I was teaching, I had a student who lived in a shelter for a while. Want to know what she became? A doctor? Where you sleep doesn't define who you are or who you'll become." Lily's shoulders relaxed slightly as she sipped her cocoa. "Really?" "Really. And I happen to know you're just as smart and brave as she was." That evening, after a simple dinner of Margaret's homemade soup, Jack tucked Lily into bed. The small room already felt like a sanctuary, with Lily's drawings taped to the walls and her teddy bear propped against the pillow. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small in the darkness. "Can we stay here forever?" Jack's throat tightened. "We'll see, sweetheart. For now, let's just be grateful for today." He kissed her forehead and waited until her breathing evened out into sleep. Needing some air, Jack stepped outside. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. He walked to the small garden bench, but stopped short when he heard voices from the other side of the fence. "It's not right," Mrs. Hawkins was saying. "Margaret's too old to see how she's being used. That man probably has a criminal record. Did you notice how rough he looks?" "What are you going to do?" another voice asked. "If Margaret won't wake up and see reason, I'll have to call the authorities myself. We can't have people like that in our neighborhood. Think of our property values." Jack's fists clenched at his sides, nails biting into his palms. The words hit him like physical blows, each one threatening the fragile peace he'd found for Lily. He thought of his daughter finally sleeping in a real bed, of Margaret's kindness, of all they stood to lose. Margaret stood in her kitchen the next morning, stirring her coffee while watching Jack through the window. He was already hard at work, fixing a loose shutter on her house. The early sunlight caught the silver in his dark hair. Premature gray, she thought, from carrying too many burdens. "Jack," she called from the back door. "Come have some breakfast before you work yourself to the bone." He climbed down from the ladder, wiping his hands on his jeans. Inside, the kitchen was warm and smelled of cinnamon toast. Lily sat at the table, happily munching away, her schoolbook spread before her. "I heard something interesting at church yesterday," Margaret said, sliding a plate in front of Jack. "They're starting a renovation project, quite extensive. The old sanctuary needs work, and they're adding a community center." Jack nodded politely, but kept his eyes on his plate. "They're looking for a foreman," Margaret continued, "someone with real construction experience. Pastor Williams is handling the interviews himself." "I appreciate the thought," Jack said quietly, "but I doubt they'd want." He gestured vaguely at himself. "They'd be lucky to have you," Margaret insisted. "I've seen your work this past week. You have a gift, Jack Turner." Lily looked up from her arithmetic. "Daddy's the best builder ever. He used to make me doll houses." Jack's expression softened at his daughter's words. "That was a long time ago, sweetheart." Margaret placed a business card on the table. "Pastor Williams is interviewing today, 9 o'clock. Her tone was gentle but firm. "Sometimes, Jack, grace comes disguised as an opportunity." After seeing Lily off to school, Jack stood in front of the mirror in the guest house bathroom. He'd borrowed an iron from Margaret to press his only decent shirt. His reflection showed a man trying hard to look presentable, despite the worn collar and slightly mismatched buttons. The church was a grand old building of red brick and white trim, its steeple reaching hopefully toward the morning skylight. Jack parked his sedan, looking even more beaten up in the church lot, and took a deep breath. Pastor Williams met him in his office, a welcoming space filled with books and the scent of coffee. The pastor was younger than Jack expected, with kind eyes and an easy manner. "So tell me about your experience," Pastor Williams said, gesturing for Jack to sit. Jack spoke honestly about his 15 years in construction, starting as a laborer and working his way up to foreman. He described the projects he'd managed, the teams he'd led, careful not to let his voice catch when mentioning his recent setbacks. "And why do you want this position?" the pastor asked. Jack paused, considering his words carefully. "I need work, that's true," he admitted. "But more than that, I need to show my daughter that setbacks don't define us, that with faith and hard work we can rebuild." Pastor Williams studied him for a long moment. "The pay isn't what you might have earned before," he said, "but it's steady work and we take care of our own here." By the end of the interview, Jack had the job. He walked out into the sunshine, feeling lighter than he had in months. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jack threw himself into the work, reviewing plans, coordinating with volunteers, and tackling the most challenging repairs himself. The old sanctuary's bones were solid, but years of neglect had taken their toll. Every fixed leak and straightened beam felt like a small victory. On Wednesday afternoon, Margaret brought Lily to visit the site. Several other children were there with their parents, who were volunteers. Someone had set up a craft table where the kids could paint and draw while their parents worked. "Daddy!" Lily called out, running to him. Jack scooped her up, not caring about the dust on his clothes. "Look at all this," she said, eyes wide at the scaffolding and activity. "Are you building a castle?" Jack laughed, a real laugh that surprised him with its ease. "Not quite, but something special." Lily joined the other children at the craft table, soon absorbed in creating her own architectural masterpieces. Jack watched her chatting with a girl her age, their heads bent together over their paintings. "She's blooming," Margaret observed, standing beside him, "just like her father." The weekend brought a community event at the church, a combination workday and potluck. The sanctuary buzzed with energy as volunteers painted walls and arranged new chairs. Children darted between the adults, their laughter echoing off the high ceiling. Jack found himself in the middle of it all, directing traffic and solving problems. He noticed with quiet satisfaction how people listened when he spoke, asked his opinion, treated him with respect earned through competence and hard work. Lily had become the unofficial leader of the children's art squad, organizing them to create decorations for the new community center walls. Her latest masterpiece, a rainbow-colored cross surrounded by stick figure people holding hands, earned a prime spot near the entrance. During lunch, Jack sat with Lily on the church steps, sharing a plate of Mrs. Peterson's famous fried chicken. His daughter's face was smudged with paint, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. "Are you having fun?" he asked, offering her the last biscuit. "The most fun," she declared. "Can we do this every weekend?" Jack felt something unlock in his chest, a tight space he hadn't even known was there. "We'll do our best," he promised. Margaret joined them, carrying cups of lemonade. She watched them with grandmother's eyes, soft with affection. The afternoon sun painted everything in warm gold, and for a moment, Jack could almost believe in perfect endings. The drive home was filled with Lily's chatter about her new friends and their artistic plans for next weekend. Jack listened, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his daughter's small fingers. But as they turned onto Margaret Street, his heart stumbled. A silver sedan was parked in front of the house. A woman in a dark suit stood on the porch, clipboard in hand, waiting. The social worker's heels clicked sharply against the driveway as she approached, her navy blazer crisp in the afternoon sun. Her presence cast a shadow over the happy moment they'd just shared at the church event. Jack's stomach twisted as he saw the manila folder tucked under her arm. "Mr. Turner?" Her voice was professional but cold. "I'm Ms. Peterson from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss your living situation with Lily." Margaret stepped forward, her shoulders squared. "I'm Margaret Whitfield. This is my property, and Jack and Lily are my guests." Miss Peterson's pen scratched across her notepad. "We've received concerning reports about Lily's welfare. There are allegations of extended homelessness and neglect." Jack's throat went dry. "I've never neglected my daughter. Yes, we went through a rough patch, but living in a vehicle with a minor is considered endangerment, Mr. Turner." She flipped through her papers. "No permanent address, unstable employment history." "He has a job now," Margaret interjected. "He's the foreman at—" "Recent employment doesn't erase past concerns." Miss Peterson's eyes swept over the guest house. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation. In the meantime, Lily will be placed in temporary foster care." "No." Jack's voice cracked. "Please, she's all I have." The screen door creaked and Lily appeared, still wearing her paint-stained church clothes. "Daddy?" "What's happening?" Jack knelt before her, his hands trembling as they rested on her small shoulders. "Baby, these people, they need to make sure you're being taken care of properly. You'll have to stay somewhere else for a little while." Lily's lower lip quivered. "But I want to stay with you and Miss Margaret." "I know, sweetheart." Jack pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "It's just temporary. I promise." Two more social workers appeared, one carrying Lily's teddy bear from inside. Lily clutched it desperately when they handed it to her, her small fingers white against its worn fur. "Daddy, please!" Lily's cries pierced the air as they led her toward their car. "I'll be good. Don't let them take me." Jack stood frozen, every fiber of his being screaming to run after her, to fight, to do something. But he knew that would only make things worse. Margaret's hand gripped his arm, holding him steady as Lily's tears faded behind the car's tinted windows. The following hours passed in a blur. Jack paced the guest house, his mind replaying every mistake, every wrong turn that led to this moment. The walls seemed to close in, mocking him with Lily's drawings still taped carefully beside her bed. "I failed her." Jack's voice was hollow as he slumped onto the couch. "Just like I failed Sarah." Margaret sat beside him, her presence solid and unwavering. "You haven't failed anyone, Jack Turner. You fought harder than most people ever will. I let them take my little girl." His hands clenched into fists. "I promised Sarah I'd keep her safe, give her a good life. Instead, I let her sleep in a car, let her go hungry some nights." "Stop that right now." Margaret's voice carried the stern authority of her teaching years. "My son, Thomas, the soldier who gave you that locket, he used to say courage isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. Across town, in a stranger's house, Lily sat on an unfamiliar bed. Her foster caretaker, Mrs. Davis, brought her a glass of milk and cookies, trying to coax out a smile. "Your daddy must love you very much," Mrs. Davis said gently, noticing how Lily hugged her teddy bear. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. "He says I'm his reason for breathing. Even when we were in the car, he made sure I was warm and told me stories about angels watching over us." She touched her bear's worn ear. "Miss Margaret is like our angel. She gave us a home and makes Daddy smile again." Back in the guest house, darkness had fallen. Jack sat on the edge of Lily's empty bed, his fingers trailing over her favorite blanket. The room felt wrong without her quiet breathing, without her sleepy, "I love you, Daddy," before drifting off. Margaret appeared in the doorway, something glinting in her hand. She crossed the room slowly, her slippers whispering against the floor. Sitting beside Jack, she pressed the cool metal of Thomas's locket into his palm. "You're stronger than you believe," she whispered, closing his fingers around it. "Thomas saw that strength in you years ago, and I see it now." The dam finally broke. Jack's shoulders shook as sobs tore from his throat, years of held-back tears flowing freely. Margaret wrapped her arms around him, holding him like a mother would, like she must have held Thomas long ago. "I miss her so much," Jack choked out. "I can't lose her too." "We'll fight for her," Margaret promised, her own voice thick with tears. "Together." The courthouse loomed before Jack like a mountain of stone and judgment. His borrowed suit jacket felt stiff and foreign, but Margaret had insisted it would make a good impression. His calloused hands fidgeted with the silver locket she'd given him, his unexpected touchstone of hope. "Remember," Margaret whispered as they climbed the courthouse steps, "you're not alone anymore." Inside the courtroom, morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Jack's heart ached at the sight of Lily sitting with her temporary foster family. She wore the blue dress Margaret had bought her, her teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest. When their eyes met, she gave him a small wave that nearly broke him. Pastor Williams sat in the front row, along with several volunteers from the church renovation project. Their presence steadied Jack's nerves, but his confidence wavered when Mrs. Hawkins strode in, her designer handbag swinging purposefully at her side. The proceedings began with a formality that made Jack's head spin. His lawyer, provided pro bono through the church's legal aid program, presented documents showing his new employment and living situation. Then came Mrs. Hawkins' testimony. She perched on the witness stand like a queen on her throne. "I've lived in that neighborhood for 30 years, she declared, her voice sharp with certainty. "We maintain certain standards." Mr. Turner was living in his car, a car, with that poor child. And now he's taken advantage of dear Margaret's goodness, moving into her property like some kind of vagrant. Jack's fists clenched under the table. His lawyer stood to cross-examine her. "Mrs. Hawkins, have you ever actually spoken with Mr. Turner?" "I hardly need to. I've seen enough." "So you haven't witnessed any direct interaction between him and his daughter?" Mrs. Hawkins sniffed. "I saw them eating from cans in that filthy car. Is that the kind of life a child should have?" One by one, different voices rose to paint a different picture. Pastor Williams spoke of Jack's dedication to the renovation project, how he'd stayed late to ensure the children's playground would be safe. "He's not just working for a paycheck," the pastor testified. "He's helping build something for families in need, families like his own once was." Mrs. Chen, Lily's current teacher, described how Jack attended every parent meeting despite his exhaustion after long work days. Lily's homework is always complete, and she talks about the stories her father reads to her every night. That girl knows she's loved. Tom Fletcher, a volunteer from the church project, recalled how Jack had taught his teenage son about proper tool safety. He didn't have to do that, but that's the kind of man he is. Careful, responsible, always thinking of others. When Margaret took the stand, her voice trembled but held firm. She clutched her handkerchief as she described the night she first met Jack and Lily. "I saw a father doing everything in his power to protect his child," she said. He was heating soup for her dinner when he probably hadn't eaten himself. That's not neglect. That's sacrifice. Her eyes welled with tears as she continued. My son died serving our country. He once helped Jack years ago, giving him this very locket. She touched her throat where an identical locket lay. When I discovered this connection, I knew God had brought them to me. Jack reminds me so much of my David, his integrity, his determination to do what's right no matter how hard things get. Margaret's voice grew stronger. I'm not some confused old woman being taken advantage of. I'm a mother who recognizes a good father when she sees one. Jack and Lily aren't just tenants. They're the family I thought I'd lost forever. The courtroom fell silent. Jack blinked back tears, the locket warm in his pocket. Finally, Lily's court-appointed advocate spoke. She described Lily's artwork, drawings of her father as a superhero, of their car as a magical spaceship that kept them safe, of Margaret's house with a rainbow above it. This is a child who feels secure in her father's love, the advocate concluded. She's resilient because he taught her to be. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, listened to it all without expression. When the testimonies concluded, she removed her glasses and rubbed her temples. We'll take a 15-minute recess, she announced. I'll return with my decision. Jack stood on shaky legs as the courtroom began to empty. Margaret squeezed his arm, and Pastor Williams patted his shoulder. Mrs. Hawkins swept past without a glance, her heels clicking against the floor. In the hallway, Jack paced, too nervous to sit. The locket felt heavy in his pocket, a weight of history, hope, and connection. Through the window, he could see autumn leaves swirling in the courtyard, red and gold against the gray stone walls. Somewhere in the building, Lily was waiting too, probably holding tight to her teddy bear, just as he was holding tight to his faith that love would be enough. The 15 minutes stretched like hours. Each time the elevator dinged, Jack's heart jumped, thinking it was time to return. Margaret sat quietly on a nearby bench, her lips moving in silent prayer. Pastor Williams made phone calls to the church prayer chain, while the other supporters huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones. Finally, the bailiff appeared at the courtroom doors. All parties in the Turner case, please return to the courtroom. Jack wiped his palms on his borrowed suit pants and took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would decide their future. As he walked back into the courtroom, he felt the weight of every step, every choice, every sacrifice that had led him here. The judge returned to her bench, her face still unreadable. She shuffled her papers, adjusted her glasses, and looked out over the crowded courtroom. Jack's heart pounded so hard he could barely hear anything else as he waited for her to speak. The afternoon sun streamed through the courthouse windows, casting a warm glow across the tense faces of those gathered. Jack stood at attention, his shoulders rigid, as Judge Harrison settled into her chair after the recess. The courtroom fell silent, save for the gentle whirring of the ceiling fans above. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, Judge Harrison began, adjusting her reading glasses, this court finds no compelling reason to separate Mr. Turner from his daughter. She paused, her eyes moving from Jack to Lily. The dedication of a father who went to extraordinary lengths to keep his child safe and cared for, even in the most difficult circumstances, is evident. Jack's knees weakened with relief. Margaret, sitting directly behind him, squeezed his shoulder gently. Furthermore, the judge continued, the outpouring of community support demonstrates Mr. Turner's commitment to rebuilding a stable life for his family. The court hereby orders the immediate return of Lily Turner to her father's custody. Before the judge could say more, Lily broke free from her foster care worker's gentle hold. Her Mary Jane shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as she ran across the courtroom, her blue dress flowing behind her like wings. "Daddy!" she cried out. Jack dropped to one knee, catching his daughter in his arms. He lifted her up, holding her close as if she might disappear if he let go. The tears he'd held back for so long finally fell freely. "My baby girl," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so sorry." Lily wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Don't cry, Daddy. We're home now." Around them, the gathered townspeople, volunteers from the church project, Lily's teacher, Even some of the construction workers broke into soft applause. Mrs. Peterson, Lily's art teacher, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The pastor nodded approvingly, a warm smile on his weathered face. Judge Harrison cleared her throat, though her own eyes seemed misty. "I'd like to acknowledge something else," she said, waiting for the room to quiet. "Mrs. Margaret Whitfield, would you please stand?" Margaret rose slowly, her hands clasped together to stop their trembling. "Your actions exemplify the very best of human compassion," the judge declared. "That first knock on a car window on a cold night wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a reminder that community matters, that we all have a responsibility to each other." She smiled genuinely. "This court commends you for opening not just your home, but your heart." Margaret's voice quavered as she responded, "Thank you, Your Honor. But they've given me far more than I gave them." After the formal proceedings concluded, well-wishers surrounded Jack, Lily, and Margaret. The pastor promised to hold Jack's position at the renovation project. Mrs. Peterson showed Lily a drawing she'd saved from class. Even the social worker who had initially removed Lily approached to congratulate them, her earlier professional distance melting into genuine warmth. As they finally left the courthouse, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight, Lily held both Jack's and Margaret's hands, skipping between them. The autumn air felt crisp and clean, like a fresh start. "Can we go home now?" Lily asked, looking up at both adults. "I'm hungry." Margaret laughed, the sound light and musical. "I have a pot roast waiting in the slow cooker. Been cooking all day while we were here." The drive back to Margaret's house, their home now, was peaceful. Lily chattered from the back seat about showing her teddy bear her drawings and sleeping in her own bed again. Jack caught Margaret's eye in the rearview mirror of his old sedan as they followed her car, and they shared a look of pure gratitude. Later that evening, the small guest house glowed with warmth and life. The kitchen table, once a symbol of Jack's uncertainty, now held plates of pot roast, carrots, and fresh rolls. The scent of home cooking filled every corner of the space. Lily sat between Jack and Margaret, her plate already half empty, swinging her legs happily under the table. "Miss Margaret," she said between bites, "can I hang my new drawing on the fridge?" "Of course, sweetheart," Margaret replied. "This is your home. You can hang your artwork anywhere you like." Jack set down his fork, emotion suddenly thick in his throat. "Margaret," he began, then had to pause to steady his voice. "I don't know how to thank you. For everything. For that first knock, for believing in us, for standing up for us today." Margaret reached across the table and patted his hand. "Jack Turner, you don't need to thank me. You and Lily, you've filled an empty space in my heart I thought would never be full again." "We're family now," Jack said firmly, the words feeling right as soon as they left his mouth. Maybe not by blood, but by something just as strong. Lily nodded sagely, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. "Like in my drawing," she said, pointing to the refrigerator where she'd already hung her latest artwork, a picture of 3 people holding hands under a bright sun. The small guest house, once just a shelter from desperation, now rang with the sound of their laughter and love. Through the window, the autumn evening settled softly around them, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jack felt completely at peace. The December air was crisp and clean as Jack Turner stepped out of his truck, now parked proudly in the driveway of Margaret's guest house. His work boots crunched in the fresh snow as he carried a small Christmas tree toward the door. The past few weeks had brought changes he'd never dared to dream of just months ago. "Daddy's home!" Lily called from inside, her face pressed against the window. Her breath left foggy circles on the glass as she bounced with excitement. Jack couldn't help but smile. The promotion to lead foreman had come as a surprise, but the pastor had seen something in him that Jack was only beginning to see in himself. Now he was overseeing the construction of affordable homes for families who'd faced the same struggles he had. Every nail hammered felt like giving back. Every wall raised like building hope. Margaret opened the door before he could reach for the handle. "Oh, it's perfect!" she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling at the modest pine tree. "Lily's been watching for you since school let out." Inside, the guest house was warm and inviting. The scent of Margaret's famous sugar cookies filled the air, and cheerful music played softly from an old radio. Lily rushed to help, her school backpack still hanging from one shoulder. "Can we decorate it now?" she asked, practically dancing around Jack as he secured the tree in its stand. "First things first," Margaret said, heading to a closet. "I have something special." She returned with a worn cardboard box labeled Christmas in faded marker. "These were my son's favorite decorations. I think he'd want us to use them." Jack's throat tightened as he watched Margaret carefully unwrap each ornament. She handled them like precious memories, telling stories about each one. Lily listened intently, asking questions about the soldier in the photographs Margaret shared. They worked together, transforming the simple tree into something magical. Lily insisted on hanging the colorful balls herself, while Jack helped with the lights. Margaret supervised, occasionally adjusting an ornament when no one was looking. "Look what I made at school," Lily announced, pulling something from her backpack. It was a small ornament crafted from her teddy bear's ribbon, the same bear that had comforted her during those cold nights in the car. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Jack said, his voice soft with emotion. "Where should we put it?" "Up high," Lily decided, "so it can remind us of the night God opened the door." Margaret touched the locket at her neck, the same one her son had given Jack years ago. "What do you mean by that, dear?" Lily climbed onto a chair, reaching to hang her ornament near the top. "The night you knocked on our window, Mrs. Kfe." "Margaret, that's when God opened the door to our new life." Jack had to turn away for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple truth in his daughter's words. That gentle knock had indeed changed everything. He thought about the families who would soon have homes because of the project he was leading. Maybe they'd hear their own version of that knock someday. As evening settled in, snow began to fall outside the windows. The three of them sat together on the couch, admiring their handiwork. The tree lights cast a warm glow across the room, making shadows dance on the walls. "Time for bed, little artist," Jack said, noticing Lily's eyes growing heavy. "But it's Christmas Eve," she protested through a yawn. "And Santa needs you fast asleep," Margaret added with a wink. Jack carried Lily to her room, a real room, with warm blankets and walls covered in her drawings. She changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed, clutching her teddy bear close. "Daddy," she whispered as he tucked her in. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad we're home." Jack's heart swelled. Home. Such a simple word that had seemed so far out of reach not long ago. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Good night, Daddy," Lily murmured, already drifting off. Margaret stood in the doorway, watching the scene with gentle eyes. The Christmas tree's glow filtered in from the living room, casting everything in soft, warm light. Jack looked up at Margaret, seeing in her face the same peace he felt in his heart. In that moment, with snow falling silently outside and his daughter sleeping safely in her bed, Jack understood that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped not in paper and ribbons, but in moments of grace, in gentle knocks that change everything. The morning after Christmas dawned quietly, with soft winter light filtering through the frosted window panes of the guest house. Jack Turner stood by the window, coffee mug warming his hands, watching as Margaret made her way across the snow-dusted yard. She wore her favorite red wool coat and hummed a gentle tune that carried faintly through the crisp air. Her footprints left a meandering trail in the fresh powder as she checked on her winter flowers. Jack turned to glance at Lily, still fast asleep in the small bedroom. Her teddy bear was tucked securely under her arm, and her face held that peaceful expression that made his heart ache with gratitude. Christmas wrapping paper still littered the floor from yesterday's celebrations, and the small tree twinkled in the corner. Looking at this scene of quiet comfort, Jack could hardly believe how far they'd come since that cold night in the Walmart parking lot. "Margaret," he called softly as he stepped outside. "Would you like to see something special today?" She turned, her cheeks rosy from the winter air. "What did you have in mind?" "The housing project. We just finished the first phase and families are moving in today." An hour later, after Lily had woken and eaten breakfast, they drove to the construction site. The transformation from empty lot to neighborhood was remarkable. Fresh paint gleamed on new porches, and moving trucks dotted the street. Children already played in the yards, their laughter echoing off the buildings. "It's beautiful, Jack," Margaret breathed, taking in the sight. Simply beautiful. They walked along the shoveled pathway, greeting workers and new residents. A young woman struggled with boxes on her front steps, a toddler clinging to her leg. "Here, let me help with that," Jack offered, easily lifting the heavy box. "Thank you," the woman said, relief evident in her voice. "I'm Sarah. We're just moving in today." Her eyes grew misty as she looked at her new home. "I never thought we'd have a place like this. We've been staying with my sister for months." Margaret stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. "Welcome home, dear." As they helped Sarah with her boxes, she shared her story. Lost job, mounting bills, the struggle to keep her child fed and warm. Jack listened, remembering his own similar journey. Later, as they watched Sarah's toddler chase bubbles in the yard, Margaret turned to Jack. "This is what your second chance was meant for," she said softly, "to give others theirs." The truth of her words settled deep in Jack's chest. Every nail he'd hammered, every wall he'd raised, it wasn't just about building houses. It was about creating sanctuaries for families like his own had once been. That evening, they sat in the warmth of the guest house. The fireplace crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Lily had spread her coloring supplies across the coffee table, humming contentedly to herself. Margaret sat in her favorite armchair, a small wrapped package in her lap. "Jack," she said, her voice tender, "I have something for you." She held out the box, wrapped in simple silver paper. Jack took it carefully, aware of the weight of the moment in Margaret's eyes. As he unwrapped it, his hands trembled slightly. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, lay a gleaming army medal. "It was my son's," Margaret explained, her voice thick with emotion. "His silver star. I've kept it close all these years, but now—" She reached over and closed Jack's fingers around it. "Now it belongs with you. Your family, Jack. You and Lily, both." Jack stared at the medal, words failing him. Tears welled in his eyes as he thought of Margaret's son, the soldier who'd shown him kindness years ago, whose locket had connected their lives in ways he never could have imagined. Before he could find his voice, Lily burst into the room, clutching her sketchbook. "Look what I drew," she exclaimed, holding up her latest creation. The picture showed 3 figures holding hands beneath a roof, Jack, Lily, and Margaret, their faces bright with crayon-drawn smiles. Above them, she'd written in careful letters, "My family." Margaret wiped her eyes, pulling Lily close for a hug. "It's perfect, sweetheart." Later, they bundled up and stepped outside into the clear night. Stars sparkled overhead, brilliant against the velvet darkness. Lily tilted her head back, counting the constellations Margaret had taught her. Jack knelt beside his daughter, his voice soft. "You know, Lily, no matter how dark life gets, there's always a knock waiting to open the next door." Margaret reached out, taking their hands in hers. Together, they turned toward the guest house, where warm light spilled from the windows and the Christmas tree still twinkled. They walked back slowly, their footsteps in sync, toward the place that had become more than just a shelter. It had become their home. If Jack's courage, Lily's hope, and Margaret's kindness touched your heart even just a little, take a moment, breathe it in, because sometimes the strongest families are born not from blood, but from love, faith, and second chances. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of Jack, Lily, and Margaret's journey resonated with you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your words inspire more than you know. If you believe in stories that heal, uplift, and remind us of the quiet strength in everyday people, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. Your time, your presence, your kindness, they mean the world. Until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop listening.